Hello, my name is Will from Basketball Network. Today we have a special guest on our show. We have Coby Karl, former NBA player, basketball player in general, and the current head coach of South Bay Lakers. Coby, it's a pleasure having you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Will. It's exciting.
Pleasure. Pleasure is all mine. And when it comes to basketball in general, and you've been in the game for forever, pretty much. I always like to start off with a question. Since you have a very strong basketball background, um, growing up as being a son to one of the most famous NBA coaches of all time, what actually got you into basketball? Was it from a family standpoint, or it just came naturally?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think I have two kids who are 6 and 4 right now, so I think about that a lot. How to cultivate their passion for whatever they do, and I thought my dad did a really masterful job of creating that within me and cultivating that, which I think is very difficult, especially for a personality like him. He's very passionate, very competitive, wants to go get it, but he never forced me into it. I think my love started from being around his teams, and
Hmm.
then seeing the energy uh, in the building during games, seeing the preparation and the camaraderie that's involved in practice and in the locker room. I was a ball boy for a lot of his teams. The memories that are coming to mind right now are actually when we were in Albany with the CBA with the Patroons, and then moving on to Spain with Real Madrid in
Hmm.
those locker rooms, and that's where the energy really picked up. Right, it was being part of those. The ACB games and Copa del Rey and being in those arenas. I remember signing autographs because the fans were just so crazy. It was, I think I was like 8 years old. So just being part of that family, the basketball family, that as being taking part in the sport, you start to get uh, you just start to get addicted to it. You want to be there, you want to show up, and you want to be part of it. Those friendships and the bond that is created.
Mm. And since you mentioned your dad and he coached Real Madrid in back in the day, I think it was in the late '80s.
Yeah.
What was your experience? Did you live in Spain for a decent amount of time, or you just came for a visit? How was that experience for you growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I was young. I think like you said, I think it was I was maybe like 6, 7, 8 years old, and so we went to Albany, New York, and then he got the job in Madrid and was there for a year, and then they brought him back another year later.
Mhm.
So um, I was young and just really learning what life was all about and kind of figuring it out as I went. Um, we were in Madrid both times with him. The fans were crazy. I remember that. The culture was so different than the American culture, which was fun. It was a little slower pace, um, but we were at the American School of Madrid, my sister and I, and we were just kids. We were we were enjoying ourselves. I remember I was in judo class learning some Spanish, and uh, things were different. And that was kind of my introduction to just how the world is so different outside of
Mhm.
outside of our small countries or our countries that we live in.
And it gives you a different perspective. You get it kind of enriches you as a person,
Absolutely.
especially as you grow up. I guess you kind of appreciate it more because you
Yeah.
have that experience with you. And you actually, I was, when I was doing a bit of research on you, you actually had a very interesting, well, in my opinion, interesting basketball career as a player. You've been all over the place. You've been in the G League, in the NBA. You played in Europe. Can you give us a bit of a breakdown of who you were as a player and what kind of different experiences did you had during your playing days when you were
Yeah,
still?
absolutely. I mean, that's like you said, my career I think was about 8 years, maybe 9.
Mm,
And it was different. I don't think there's not too many people that took the same path that I've taken. I was a late bloomer physically,
mm,
and even as with the skills of the game, and uh, and so I was a walk on out of high school, and I went to Boise State University as a walk-on. Ended up getting a scholarship and earning my way into the lineup, and performed at a decent level. And then I went undrafted again, so kind of a walk on to the professional ranks, and ended up making the team with the Lakers. But my goal was always to be in the NBA. I just wanted to be in the NBA. So everything I was doing was, I just want to be part of it, part of what I had experienced with my dad's teams in Seattle and Denver and Milwaukee. And because the NBA is just, it's the best of the best, and I want to be part of that. So even, after I got released from a couple different teams, my wife and I ended up making our way to Europe and participating in, really, really, really high level basketball, which I was completely naive to, which, most young American basketball players are, and played in Spain, and ended up in Italy for a little bit, in Germany, and, really got to experience just different levels of basketball, as well as different types of basketball, which was really cool to see. And as a kid who thought I knew it all, I got to see that you could do it so many different ways and have success. And, getting my ass kicked by Barcelona when I was in Granada, and, seeing Ricky Rubio's team that I was on in Barcelona, and seeing these young, really hungry, undersized guards have success. Like one guy who's still playing is Pau Ribas. He actually went back to Barcelona. And I remember when I first met him, I was like, who's this little skinny, I think he was maybe 20 years old at the time, and he was our captain. And, he goes on to play in the national team. So I just got an appreciation for how basketball is so complex and different, and you can do so many different things well to make you successful.
And what I've seen is that your first season in the NBA was with the Lakers, which is, I think it was the 2007-2008 season, which, as we all know, was the Lakers had a championship caliber team.
Yeah.
What was it like, being a part of that team that had so much talent, and that was competitive, that was aiming for a championship?
It was interesting, Will, now that you say that, because living it the previous year, there was a lot of, or not a lot, but there was some media attention on Coby for kind of throwing his teammates under the bus during the series. They had struggled. They had a couple journeymen playing starting roles, and Coby was really, I don't know if you guys probably don't remember, but Coby asked for a trade right at the beginning of the season. And he was really disgruntled. He wanted to win and didn't feel like the team was providing him enough talent to win. So, one, being on that team, you're kind of a little uncomfortable because of that personality type, is really seeking to succeed at the highest level like he already had. So when we went to training camp, Phil had us introduce ourselves in the first team meeting. I'm Coby Karl, went to Boise State University, and all the rookies went first and up into the vets. And when it got to Coby, he was always kind of to himself, but he just said, I'm Kobe Bryant. I want to win a championship. And that was it.
Very simple, very straightforward.
Yeah, and that sets the tone, right? Because that's that type of seriousness, and we all know, looking back now on his life, unfortunately we lost him, but looking back on his life, how powerful that drive was for him, and then how influential it was on his teammates and organizations and society in general. That he was able to create those things, and we ended up trading for Pau Gasol. So we started the season off as kind of an unknown, and then we got Pau. And you could tell there was an energy. Bynum stepped up, and Lamar was playing great, and everything kind of fit into where it was supposed to be. Unfortunately, ran into a really strong veteran team, physical team in Boston that overpowered us, and they were just at a different point in their careers at that point, and we learned a lot of lessons. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to reap the benefits of those lessons because I ended up getting cut the next season. But as we know, they went on and had an incredible stretch with Pau as Kobe's right hand man.
Yeah. That was actually a great team, and with a lot of talent. It was coached by Phil Jackson, so it just, I think it took them a bit longer to kind of get to that level, especially when you're taking into account that Boston Celtics team that also had a lot of talent, and they also had to win immediately. So for them was also, it's a championship or a bust season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's been documented pretty well that Kobe challenged Powell that summer to be more physical and to stand up to the bully that Kevin Garnett or Kendrick Perkins were to them. And it's not his, it wasn't his nature. He was all, he's more skilled and just a better talented, more talented basketball player. But it was really cool to see that maturation and see that development. And now you can see in Powell when he talks about Kobe and that relationship, how much he appreciated that his teammate pushing him to be better and to challenge themselves to want more. So that was a fun thing about being part of that group, is just seeing the start of it and then seeing where it ended.
Mhm. You've also been a part of the Cleveland Cavaliers in 2009, which also
Yeah.
gave you an opportunity to play alongside another great player, which is LeBron James. What was your how would you describe the difference between them, not just in terms of playing style, because we're pretty much aware that they were two different players, but how they approach the team, their teammates, practice. What do you think were the similarities and the differences between them?
Um, so I mean, they were at such different points in their career.
Hmm.
It's a everyone always wants to know in that question. But they were at such different points. LeBron was such a young star at that point. He was just making his way. Obviously, he had already proven himself. I think he went to the finals and lost to San Antonio earlier in his career, and he had taken a couple teams on his back. And but he was still seeking that that the championship. He was still seeking that attention to be the best in the world, and he had the work ethic, which was very similar to Kobe's, in that he was in the weight room every morning getting his work in, and he loved playing the game. But when I got with Kobe, he had already kind of won a couple championships, and he was already on that. He'd really established his professional habits in terms of how he works, when he works, and figuring out, learning from Coach Jackson and some of those veterans of you got to take some time off from time to time. And during the season there's different Coach Jackson always said there's three different acts this season, first act, second act, and third act. And
Hmm.
it was kind of a build up in the middle section. So it was just a very different time in their careers. But um I'd never seen, when I played with LeBron, I'd never seen anyone affect the game in so many different ways.
Hmm.
He could physically dominate on the defensive end, block a shot, get the rebound, going down in transition, then dunk on you, and just change the whole game. Whereas Kobe did it in more of a mental, psychological way. He was obviously lethal in so many different ways, especially once that you got into the half court at the end of the games. He was meticulous with his execution there, but he didn't have the same physicality that LeBron had, and youth. Like, LeBron was so energetic at that point. He would do things that were, he still doesn't today, but at that point it was just, that's who he was, and so youthful. So it was very different. It was almost like seeing it was like seeing a young savant, and now you see LeBron and how meticulous he was or is, and he's learned so many of these tricks. It's just, as as a basketball player, playing against a high school kid, even if they're more talented, more energetic, once you learn the tricks, all that stuff goes away. And that's the fun part of being around coaching for so long, is I've kind of had an inside view on that, and I got to know some of those secrets and learn them before a lot of people did.
Hmm. Going back to your playing career, because you have this experience of playing in the States, in the G League and the NBA, and then later on in Europe, what do you think are the main differences between the playing style or the style of play that is, dominant in the United States in comparison to Europe? Was it anything that was surprising for you when you came to Europe in terms of how things are, how basketball is perceived, maybe?
Yeah, it was very surprising just to hear, some of my coaches and the players, their interpretations of the NBA game compared to the compared to the European game, and some of those players, and then the styles are so different. So, I mean, I guess I'll start with the rules.
Mm.
The rules are so different There's no defensive 3 seconds in Europe, so you can clog the paint. Um, the rules as well in the NBA is, the physicality uh, isn't allowed as much. Back in the '90s with those rough and tumble like New York Knicks teams, and it was like a brawl, right? The
Yeah,
Pistons teams,
Pistons. Yeah.
and Europe is very similar to that. Whereas the NBA has changed their rules to make it a more fluid game and allow these extraordinary athletes to show their skills without having to hit the floor every time down the court. So I think the rules and then the way the game is refed is very different. I would say it's just like having a disciplinarian like teacher.
Mhm.
Like the European game is very tight. You have to be very tight with your skills, and what that does is you see these extremely skilled players coming out of Europe because they're not allowed to travel. They have to deal with these really big, strong, physical bigs, protecting the paint, and the referees aren't calling it. So I think that was the biggest thing is, a foul in Europe is definitely a foul in the NBA, but a foul in the NBA is not always a foul in Europe.
Mhm.
You see a lot of young Americans, including myself, go into the paint and get hit and knocked off their feet. But the referees won't call it because it's legal guarding position for a European game, whereas in America, you go into the paint and do the same thing at the pro level, and it's an automatic foul unless you're in perfect position. So it is a fascinating thing just to see. And then you see our USA team go over and play in these European competitions, and it takes them some time to get used to the travel rule, to get used to the
Mhm.
physicality, that they're not getting these little fouls um, that they get on a nightly basis in the NBA. So yeah, it's fun. It's fun to just see it. And then obviously experiencing it was a little more difficult because I had to adjust to it, and I was getting called for travels and getting frustrated for not getting foul calls. So it wasn't as fun as a player, but it is fun now being a little older, and I don't have to experience that emotional pain.
Mhm. And you actually, after your playing career was over, you made a transition to being a coach. What was your motivation behind going into that direction? Did it
Yeah.
did that came naturally, or you kind of took some time off, tried to figure out what you're gonna do, or you were ready? You kind of had it planned. I want to be a coach. I want to stay with basketball in some way, shape, and form.
Yeah, I mean, I always looked at my dad, and I mean, there's a lot of things about my dad that were difficult through his life, and
Mhm.
that we created some stress, like his lifestyle created some stress amongst our family, and different things like that, moving, and my parents' marriage got broken up because of some of those stresses. But I always looked at my dad and saw, he had this incredible community of people that were extremely motivated, extremely connected. Um, and really enjoyed what they did, and they're playing a game. It's like, so I always saw that and I was like, man, like, what if I could do this for a living? Like, I don't want to sit at a desk and like inside. Like, I love exercise, I love playing, I love competing, I love the creativity and the amazing things that happen on a basketball court. So like, what if I could do that? So I always kind of looked at it from that way. And then as I got later in my career, the NBA offered a program that you could coach when you were still playing some of the top high school players in America.
Mhm.
And so I went to that program and coached, and I got an opportunity to try these things that all these amazing coaches that had helped me be a professional player. I got to try some of these things, and I realized that like some of these high school coaches or some of the players that were at the camp didn't know some of these like little tricks. So I was like really excited. It's like, okay, like I kind of have the I can help people,
Mhm.
and that I think at the end of the day, looking back, is I wanted to be part of something bigger than myself. Now, being on a team, you're part of something bigger than yourself, but also I love the feeling of bringing, you bringing me and bringing 3 other people or whatever, 12 other people together and doing something that's exciting for us. I love that. And then also moving our lives forward in a positive way where you're learning life lessons and I'm learning life lessons. And then we'll have this bond for forever because we went through some really difficult times together, and then we went through some incredible times together. So I think just doing something for others was really what brought me to the profession of coaching. Is it wasn't about me. Coaching for me is it's not about me. It's about our team. It's about our players. It's about my staff and what I can do for other people. So I think that's really what brought me there. Is as a player, it's almost there's a selfish nature to it, because like I'm always working on my body, I'm training my skills, and you only get to be on a team for 6 months out of the year, uh, and still it's still focused on me. Whereas as a coach, I get the opportunity to help others.
Hmm. You've been a coach for the past 4 or 5 years now, and I'm always curious when I'm asking this question is since you are also, I mean, as a coach, you also have to develop players. Are there any secret ingredients to developing a player and a successful team? Have you figured it out, maybe?
No, I don't have any secrets. I mean, um, I've had the opportunity to be around my father and Coach Jackson, and great leaders like Kobe and Derek spent time with me and were willing to talk about some of these things. So I have an idea,
Mm-hmm.
and like as well as any of us, is like when you're on that team, you just have this feeling, right? There's just this feeling of camaraderie. So I have an idea, um, but I'm still trying to figure out like what is it, and I don't know if there is one thing. I
Mm-hmm.
think the intention itself of trying to bring people together to do something that's really difficult, that in itself allows a really special energy to occur. But I do think that looking at the whole person is really important, and something I've learned from Phil,
Mm-hmm.
and something my dad did really well is like not I talked to a great scout that worked for the Bulls and Coach Jackson. um uh his name's I'm forgetting his name, but he was talking about when you're evaluating a player, there's five things that you can evaluate. There's the physical skills, or
Mm-hmm.
the physical is our athletic ability or whatnot, or height, strength. Then there's the technical skills of can I shoot a three, can I dribble with my left hand, pass with my left. And then there's the tactical skills, and of like how to know how to play, know when to cut, the timing kind of things that as
Mm-hmm.
you get older you get better at. And then the things that I think a lot of coaches that I played for didn't appreciate were the psychological
Mm-hmm.
and then the sociological. And the psychological is what's my mental framework, how do I view the world, and then how can I put that into a team. We're all different, and for better or worse, it doesn't matter, but as a team you got to appreciate those things. And sociological is like, where do you fit into this group, where do you fit into the world, where do you fit into your community. And I think those were the things that I actually stopped playing, because I didn't think like I was like coaches appreciated those things, either about me or like what a team is really about. Is like it's about bringing people together,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't matter where you're from. Is we're here to do something together, and really kind of trying to teach young people who are very as athletes, we're very egocentric and we're very confident in ourselves, and we want more and more and more. And so I think those are the things that I've really been infatuated with over my career as a coach, is how do we appreciate your psychology, Will, and where you're from, and then incorporate that into where we are as a group. And I think that's really the superpower of coaching, is if you can bring people together and really make them understand makes you tick, and then what makes me tick. And then if I can do those things that is necessary for you to be successful, that makes us special. I remember Coach Jackson one time when we were in the film room and with the Lakers, it was probably middle of the season, maybe 2/3 of the way through the season, and he just stopped, and he kind of told all of our guys, he's like, you guys, it's necessary for you to know each other just as well as yourself. And he pointed out examples. He's like, if someone scores on Derek Fisher, that Derek's going to come back and attack his player, because that's what he wanted. And that if someone hits Sasha, that he's going to try to fight. He's going to try to fight him. And that if Kobe doesn't get a foul, he's going to complain. And he wasn't saying this in a judgmental way, which I think is really special about coaching. Is it's in a non-judgmental way. He was just saying you got to know that, because when Kobe gets fouled and doesn't get the call, we have to get his back, and we got to play 4-on-5 for a couple of seconds until he comes down the floor. And that's just the nature of it, of teams, is we have to deal with all these little nuances.
And you actually brought a really good point. It's all about getting different people from different, that have different mindsets on working on a common goal, which sometimes can present, it's a challenge, and you have to
Yeah,
work for it.
absolutely. I mean, for example, like you're from Croatia, right?
Yeah.
And I play with a couple of different Croatians. I play with some Serbians, and like just learning, the mindset that you guys grew up with, and it was so much different than the mindset of American or an Italian or a Spanish, and then I never appreciated that, but I wasn't very good with relationships. But I'm still friends with one of my teammates, Ivan Zarovsky,
Hmm.
and and we had a really difficult conversation because he was frustrating me and I was frustrating him. But like that conversation really brought, like, one, I was like, oh man, like he's right in a lot of different ways. And then he kind of was like, yeah, you're right. Like I'll try to be a better teammate, or whatever it was. But I think that willingness as a person and a teammate to
Hmm.
have that conversation is really where it all starts and ends, is just having that conversation, the willingness to admit that I don't know everything, and I can learn from you or I can learn from someone else is really valuable.
Hmm. Something that a lot of coaches in general, but great coaches as well. It's always getting players to buy into the coaching system that they're trying to implement. So essentially, my question to you is, how do you get players to buy into something that you're trying to impose, and you know, what is the process?
Yeah, I think I'm still learning so much, and I'm still figuring that out. Like being away from the game, I've been in Boise, Idaho, away from, and we haven't coached for a year because of the pandemic. So I've had a lot of time to think about all this stuff, and I think um, it's always a combination of everything. It's one, I have something that I'm used to doing. Like I'm comfortable playing fast offensively. I'm used to playing aggressive, attack oriented offensively, and without post ups, with really good spacing the floor, 4 out, 5 out situations where we can play drive and kick. But also, if I don't appreciate who I have on my team, if that's not what's best for them, then I need to, I'm probably going to have to adapt. So I think it's always a process of really looking at who you have and who you're coaching, um, as well as what you're good at. And so like, um, I think in the G League, it's really interesting for us because one, I basically work for Frank Vogel and the Los Angeles Lakers. Is we're trying to get Frank help. We're trying to give that coaching staff and that organization help to prepare our players to play for them. Um, but also, those players aren't going to play that same role.
Mm-hmm.
So, Alex Caruso actually said this summer, and we talked about as an organization, like putting it on the wall. It's like the Lakers aren't looking for, a score. I don't know what the exact quote was. He was basically saying like they wanted a great role player. Like the MVP of the G League very rarely gets called up and plays in the NBA for long. But a guy like Alex Caruso, who is able to do all the little things like defense, really good communicator, hustle plays, really good passer, fundamentally sound, made open shots, finished layups, like all these very simple things. He was really good at those things. Like, and it is basically the saying, like, be a star, be a superstar in your role. And so it's really difficult to, so I can't necessarily, like, Will, if you're our best player, I can't necessarily say, okay, we're just going to feed you over and over and over again, because that's not what's going to get you to where you theoretically want to go and being in the NBA. So it's sometimes it's difficult in that sense at the G League level. But I mean, in general, as a coach, I think it's like that's the fun of it, is figuring out what's best for your team, where will they find the most success, but also using your experience and wisdom and knowledge and saying, I know that this is what they think is best, but you know, I know if we want to get to where we want to get to, um, that we need to change some things, and I think that's where really good coaches are able to um, kind of teach and explain and kind of meet their players halfway, and then hold their hand on that journey.
Mm. And in terms of having working with players from the G League and who are up and coming and trying to make their way to the NBA, how do you recognize a good player, not just from a basketball standpoint, but also from their mindset, the mentality that they have, how they approach the game?
Yeah, it's a great question because we didn't participate in the G League bubble this year, so we scouted it as a coaching staff, and we had a lot of conversations about all these different players, which was a great opportunity for us to kind of take a step back and see what other teams are doing,
Hmm.
what's successful, and then really take a deep look at the individual players, and then also like looking at college players. Um, I would say I'm always attracted to aggressive players who are willing to fight,
Hmm.
and not necessarily physically get into a fight, but willing to take contact, willing to
Hmm.
take a hard foul, willing to airball a shot, run back, and then block the transition layup. Like these, like the next play speed is something that I think elaborates on that, is just that willingness to always participate in the game and not take themselves out of the game by a mistake or a failure. But I think that's kind of the psychology of the athlete that I look for, is who's willing to compete and really get into the mix. But there's also other guys that aren't necessarily, that's not necessarily what they do. Like we talked about Pau Gasol, that's not his thing. He wasn't a physical player. He learned how to do it, and he did it to the necessity that got him to be successful. For example, we coached Travis Ware, who I just talked to this morning, and he was a very skilled player, 6'9", and he wasn't soft by any means, but um, it just wasn't his nature to be super physical.
Hmm.
And so you need those guys too, because he was a 40% 3-point shooter,
Hmm.
6'9", pretty good athlete, could put the ball on the floor, knew where to be, really pretty good team defender. He could do a bunch of different things. So it's endless. It really depends on what you're looking for as an organization, and also what you're looking for as a staff. But I think the game is evolving as well. Looking at some of these players that are coming out of the American college game right now, uh, the big guys, it's just really hard, right? These post up players, some of these elite players, it's just, if you can't run up and down the floor at a really fast pace, it's really hard to play in our game right now. And I think that's where you see some of these American players go overseas and have a lot of success, because the game in some of those countries are a little slower, more half court oriented.
Hmm. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. You had the opportunity to work with Phil Jackson. Your dad is a coach. What are the main things that you learned from them that you can apply um, when you're coaching your players? Do you take something out of both of them, or?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the one thing that's the same between them, I guess I'll start there, is it's always about the team. Like,
Hmm.
team comes first. And I think it's really, like we already talked about it, I think it's really difficult for 19, 20-year-old, young 30-year-olds, um, to really understand that, because we're so driven to be successful, and whatever got us to that point, is our drive to succeed and compete. Um, but it's always about the team. And then with those guys, if once you get them to understand, then they're very comfortable in that. Once you get the once you feel the support of your teammates and the success that you can have when you help others and be part of something bigger than yourself, it's really easy. But that first initial thing is really difficult. My dad was an uber competitor.
Hmm.
A friend of mine, who actually does my podcast with me, and does my dad's podcast too, he asked my dad of his difference between, or his thoughts on my dad's style versus Phil's style as a coach. And my dad articulated it really, really well. He said, Phil looked at the game as a dance. I looked at the game as a war. And he coached the game like it's a dance, whereas my dad coached the game like it was a war. And I think that's a beautiful way to describe it. Um, whereas, you know, I saw Phil where he was very kind of hands off, let you figure it out, and it was a dance. You know, you saw guys kind of floundering around and figuring it out as they go, which is very valuable for a person to have. But also, he had a very, very keen skill at pointing out when necessary the important things. You know, he would assert himself if he needed to assert himself. You know, he would let people make mistakes, but if there was ever, you know, if you were getting out of sorts or, you know, taking away from the team, he would point it out in a very strong, you know, alpha way, which was very impactful,
Mm-hmm.
especially when he's so laid back most of the time that you can see that, you know, you don't want to mess with him. I heard the other day, you know, like as a coach, you kind of always have to keep that air of like that they like you, but they're a little scared of you. I think
Mm-hmm.
Steve Kerr was actually talking about that, and Phil had that ability. Is like, you know, everyone was comfortable with Phil and liked him, but I think he had that ability that you weren't sure. You were a little scared of him at times too.
Mm-hmm. Um, you know, that brings me to my other question. You know, what do you think separates a good coach from a great coach? We touched upon a few things along the way, but what do you think are, you know, some of the key things that you know makes a great coach?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think it's different for each person, to be honest. Um, you know, like a Tom Thibodeau, I think he's like good to great, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know where he is on that list, but you know, you look at what he's done in New York, and it's incredible. You know,
Yeah.
he did it in Chicago. New York's been struggling for so long. Um, but for like him, it's like this dedication. He creates this passion to be grinders and be
Mm-hmm.
really, you know, like this mindset almost. Um, Whereas Phil was, you know, a little hands off. It was more like a mystical kind of feel. And my dad was like an uber competitor, and he got his teams to really play hard. Don Nelson was a little creative, you know, like, so I think, I'll go back to my podcast when we had Phil on. That was the first thing that we talked about with was authenticity,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the one thing I learned from him is like how I do it. You know, me speaking for Phil is not how you would do it, Coby, and or you would do it, Will. And so I think that's really finding what's authentic to you and what you believe in. I think that's what makes a great coach is they're just being authentic to who they are. Um, and then one thing that I learned from Phil, who, you know, obviously has won all these championships, and I went to visit him in Montana at his home, and I was asking him a bunch of questions. And I asked him, you know, like what made you successful? Like, you know, this obviously this huge open-ended question, but he thought about it, and he answered it. And he said, you know, a lot of it had to do with luck.
Yeah.
You know, yeah,
It's
and I
very
think you can,
humbling. It's very
yeah,
humbling.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think he's saying that is like he's not a good coach. I don't think he's saying that and that someone else isn't a good coach or whatever it is. But I think it's the appreciation that, you know, he got lucky that he was in Chicago when Michael Jordan was there. You know, who figured that out? And that, you know, he befriended Tex Winters, and Tex Winters was friends with Jerry Krause. And, you know, like these things just add up. Like, you know, through that conversation with Phil, you look at he was going to start teaching. You know, he was going to quit coaching basketball and start teaching because he didn't find like a job yet. It's so like we're talking about this guy who ends up winning, you know, 11 championships as a coach, was about to be a teacher. So I think a lot of it is just, you know, being ready for the opportunity and then taking advantage of the opportunity. Because I think of, you know, like looking at my dad, you know, he played for Dean Smith,
Mm-hmm.
like and he was about to go to a different school, and he talked to me about he was in this like all-star game in Pittsburgh, and Bill Guthridge, who was an assistant coach for the North Carolina Tar Heels at the time,
Mm-hmm.
for Dean Smith, saw him and offered him a scholarship, and he went there, and that changed his life forever. And so like these things, like I just don't think we know, you know, what makes a great coach. I think your intention, like, you know, caring about other people.
Mm-hmm.
I think obviously hard work and being aware and like seeing what's going on and accepting things as they are, I think very valuable things that we've kind of articulated throughout this conversation.
Um, you've been around the game for such a long time, and we all know the trends in the NBA change. I would say every decade
Yeah.
decade or so. Um, what do you think about the quality of the game itself in today's NBA? And do you think the trend that we have now, where it's, where it's a shooting oriented game, do you think that will change, or it will stay here for a longer period of time?
I think, I mean, until the rules change, I don't think the facts of shooting 3 pointers is much more valuable than 2 pointers isn't going to change. So until the rule changes, I don't think it will change. So I think it will take something, those people making a decision. Um, I do think the trend of like offensive basketball will change in terms of like the spacing. I think it will. I think we'll probably start trending. At least this is my feel. Um, we'll start trending to more of a structured game, like more of a European game. With spacing. Like, and I'm trying to figure out what that looks like for myself. But utilizing the spacing and the drive and kick stuff that you see with all these uber talented athletes in the NBA, but also finding a way to incorporate all five guys on the floor. And I played in the triangle, and that's what made the triangle special is while maybe I didn't get a shot, I knew I was part of the offense because I knew that this cut, this pass, this spacing was all part of, what got Kobe Bryant that shot, or what got Pau
Mhm.
Gasol that post up, and so I think we're going to probably start seeing a more integrated game with more players incorporated into the spacing. At least that's my hope, and that's my feel right now. But that was what my dad was really good at. I don't know if you know this, but he was probably like one of the first people, like after D'Antoni, to really go to a driving kick. Play
Mhm.
shooting bigs. Um, his Denver team and with Ty Lawson, it was a really fast paced, fast break team,
Mhm.
and I think they were 29th in the NBA in 3-point percentage, and they were averaging like some ridiculous amount of points and points in the paint and free throws. So like, uh, my dad was really good at kind of seeing where the game was going and taking that jumping ahead of it and just
Mhm.
going all in. But yeah, that's my feel. I'm excited to see where it goes, and I'm really honored to be have an opportunity to be part of that as well.
Mhm.
Coaching in the G League.
Um, we yeah, it seems like in today's NBA, there's a lack. Well, at least that's what the fans say, that there's a lack of good centers, dominant big men, because everybody are now on the perimeter for the most part. Do you think we'll ever see dominant centers in a way like old school centers like Patrick Ewing, Hakeem, Shaq? Do you think we'll ever see players like that in the NBA in the near future?
I don't know. I mean, we don't know. I would say I wouldn't think so. I think you're seeing kind of what a dominant center looks like now in Joel Embiid before he got hurt.
Yeah.
And he's extraordinary athlete, like this huge, strong, talented player. And I think that's what it's going to look like is this guy that can do a little bit of everything. Like
Mhm.
this, the Lakers just acquired Andre Drummond. Same thing. This guy is a force. Granted, he doesn't have the offensive skills, but he's a really good athlete.
Yeah.
And these I think that's what you're going to see. And granted, Shaq was an incredible athlete, and these guys were incredible athletes. But like we talked about, I just don't statistically, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to post up anymore.
Mhm.
Um, unless you're trying to get guys in foul trouble or you're into the game situations where you need a bucket, like those are the really important times to post up. Um, so I just don't think it will go back to that. Jason Kidd, I've got to know him over the last couple of years with when he's been with Los Angeles, and he always says in the Lakers um, film sessions, he always said like no stress, no stress. So and what he was talking about, like when they were watching the offensive clips, it was like watch the ball movement, the ball moves around, and you see like a drive, there's no contact, limited contact on the drive. He moves it to the next guy, and that guy has no one guarding him. And I think we know now probably better than we did 20 years ago it's possible, one, because the rules are changing, but also it's much harder to guard, right? If you just keep moving the ball in
Yeah.
this fashion where you don't have to take the physical pounding, you don't have to play against the multiple defenders. And I think that's why you see the game changing so much, at least from what I see and what I've learned. um, that it just doesn't make a lot of sense unless you get to that end of game situation, or like the more of the strategy that last 4 minutes maybe of the game.
Hmm. And going back to, as a coach, you're always on the lookout for great players and players that you can build around your team. When it comes to the current players in the NBA, which player would you love to build your team around?
um I mean, I don't know. I don't study the NBA too much, but I've just appreciated what Luka's done at such a young age.
Yeah.
And it's just fun to watch, a young guy come over. Like, his story is pretty cool. Having played in the same league he played in Spain, and competed against that same caliber of player, and then see what he did at a young age, and then came over and had similar success. And I think the one thing I love about him is just that he's such a dynamic passer and playmaker, and
Hmm.
but he loves to take the big shot. Like, so I mean, for me, it's just fun to watch a guy like that, because like we were talking about in terms of like where's the game going, his style allows everyone to feel part of it, because it's not just about him. He very similar to LeBron in that way, in that he's sharing it more than he's necessarily scoring. And everyone always talks about, or I mean, not everyone, but you look at LeBron and you look at what he's done with his points. Same thing with Luka. Uh, but you look at their assists, and I think that's what makes them really special and different, is that ability to incorporate so many different people, where they're averaging almost 10 assists a game, which people want to play with those guys. And the reality with the way the business of basketball works, if people want to play with you, you can have a better team, because they're going to be willing to take less money, and they're going to, I mean, we saw it when LeBron was in Cleveland. He got some of the best players in the world to come to Cleveland and play with him. And I played in Cleveland for a half a season. There's not a lot out there in Cleveland. There's not a lot of sunshine. There's not a lot to do. So it's a credit to who LeBron was, and that type of player with like Luka.
Hmm. And interesting. It's interesting that you brought up Luca, because it's when I watch him play, it seems like he's always shifting gears. Like, he's not the most athletic guy. He's not, gifted in that regard, but
Yeah.
he's a, 6'7", 6'8" point guard. He can, there are much athletic players who are guarding him, but it seems like they're not able to stop him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right, because you're looking at a guy compared to, right? Like, we're comparing him to like John Wall or Russell
Mhm.
Westbrook, who are these extraordinarily fast, explosive athletes, where I think, Luka has that ability to change pace and kind of play at his own pace, which really keeps you off balance.
Mhm.
And I think it's a good lesson that I learned when I played in Europe, like we already talked about, where you don't have to be a really good athlete. You just have to be able to, play your game and keep the defense off balance, or, whatever it takes. And, like we were talking about how Phil coached the game as like a dance. And you look at a guy like Luka, and it is kind of like a dance, right? He's always, but he's calling the shots. He's playing at his own pace. He's making, the defender off balance. If you're going to blitz him, he's going to, pull you away from the basket. It's fun watching those guys, especially like him at such a young age. But LeBron does an excellent job of it. Chris
Mhm.
Paul does an excellent job. These elite playmakers, point guards that can just manipulate a whole defense by you as a coach. I try to be aggressive in the pick and roll, and he makes me look stupid. And or as a coach, you try to play a scheme, and then they're very aware of what's going on the court, which makes it, from a strategical standpoint, it's really difficult to coach against them. But also, it's really fun to see a player that's capable of doing that and
Mhm.
understanding what's going on at a deeper level.
Yeah, I mean, those type of players really impact the game on so many levels, and it's like watching a surgeon on during an operation. It seems
Yeah,
like they're
absolutely.
always 2 or 3 steps ahead of the competition.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big soccer fan or football fan, so I think you look at guys like, some of the great midfielders, like they're always aware of where they are, and they can kind of, there's this great sense of, before the play happens, they're ahead of it. And you look at a guy like Lionel Messi, um, I watched a documentary on him, and he has that knack of, he doesn't move a lot, but he's always surveying, he's always seeing it, he's always feeling it. And then once he attacks, he's like a snake. It's like it's already too
Yeah.
late, like he's already gone by 3, 4, or 5 defenders, and the ball's in the back of the net. It's the same thing with these really good basketball players, is they're able to survey, see, kind of calculate, and then it's already too late. Like
Yeah.
the scheme didn't work.
Yeah, yeah, and Messi. Now that you brought Messi, he's a wonder kid, and I guess one of the best football players in the world. And like you said, he's deceptively fast. Like he doesn't seem like
Yeah.
that, but when he goes off, like it's impossible to stop him.
Yeah, I mean, and like, I think it's a credit to, like, I talked to Kobe before he passed, and this, when we're talking about Messi, it made me think of him, because Messi had this ability to, like, almost 90% of the time he just makes the normal play, right? He just passes it off. He kicks it and moves it into space, and whatever. He's just a normal team player. And I was talking to Kobe about, like, why does the triangle work? And Kobe was like, well, like, when I run the triangle, like, I get it on the pinch post, and I know how you're defending me. So,
Mm,
like, if you're defending me on my right shoulder, the first 3.5 quarters of the first 46 minutes of the game, I'm just going to let you play me on my right shoulder. I know you're there, and I know I could take advantage of that. But when it matters, then I'm going to make the move that's necessary that I can get to my left shoulder,
mhm,
and I think that's the psychology that I've fallen in love with as an athlete, as a coach as well, is like, not always taking the advantage when it's given to you, but taking it when it matters most.
mhm,
And you look at an athlete like Lionel, you look at these great ones, it's like, they know what you're doing. They know what's going on. They know they're being double, triple teamed, whatever. And they're going to let you double, triple team until they're not, until they need to score. And then they're going to do what they need to do to get where they need to get.
Yeah, that's like all the great athletes have this kind of I would call it edge over the others, but it's hard to pinpoint what that actually is. It's just natural ability.
Yeah.
It's hard to
Well,
put a
I
finger
mean,
on.
no, I think it's just that, like, insatiable will to win, right? It's like,
Mm,
like, pain causes growth, and I think when you're younger, you attack, 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 until you learn, like, maybe you don't have enough energy at the end of the game when it matters most, or maybe the players start adapting, and it's just, you're not going to have words for this stuff, but you learn, like, okay, I can't do that. I need to do this. And I think that's what I talk about, non-judgmental awareness. And I think that's where you see the best coaches and players. They have this ability to see it and not necessarily judge it as good or bad, but they're just aware of it.
mhm.
They're okay. You're going to do this. Okay. Like, and it's a dance. They take that away, I'll take this. They take that, I'll take this. They give me this, I'll go here. And yeah, I mean, that's why I love sports. I love basketball for that reason, and even watching other sports.
Yeah, I've actually I've watched your podcast, Curious Leader, with Phil
Yeah,
Jackson. It was a very interesting conversation because what was interesting for me is that you talked about a lot of things that are not necessarily related to basketball and sport itself. It
yeah,
was much. I mean, I think it was a much deeper conversation because you touched upon very interesting things that kind of when you talk about all of them, they they make perfect sense. And
yeah.
who Phil was as a player and as a coach and then a leader. What is your plan with Curious Leader, with your podcast, and what did you learn anything new from having this conversation with Phil?
Yeah, I did, and I'm so thankful for my relationship with Phil. I've had a lot of those conversations, just me and him.
Hmm.
But the whole idea behind our podcast, and I don't know, as you know, there's a million podcasts now, right? But my idea was, I have access to Phil, um, and I think I've earned some trust with Phil, where he feels comfortable to have that conversation with me, because
Hmm.
we've had a lot of them, and I've been honest, he's been honest. And but so the idea of the podcast in general was, have that conversation with these people that I have access to. Jeannie Buss will be coming out soon.
Hmm.
These people that I've always wondered, from like a deeper level, like what goes into how you do it, or what goes into what Phil does. Because, like, as you said, just because I do something doesn't necessarily explain why I do something. And I always want to know the why. And to your point, I think Phil is a magician with his ability to make these really complex things seem very simple. And like you said, it's like he'll tell a 15-minute story, and at the end of it, like during it, you're like, where the hell is he going? Like, I don't even understand half the stuff. And then he finishes, and you're like, wow, yeah, no, it does make sense.
It does make
And
sense. Yeah.
yeah, so um that was our idea. Is I just wanted to be able to share this wisdom and knowledge that I had been seeking for such a long time, throughout my life, is having conversations with my dad, having conversations with guys like Phil or Derek Fisher or Coby. And unfortunately we won't be able to have that conversation with Coby, but like those were some of those most powerful conversations I've had. Is um, but to be able to share that with other people that are curious, hence the name Curious Leader.
Mm.
But yeah, I've always been curious about some of these things, and having the ability to ask them these questions and then share that with others is I hope other people value it, and that's the ambition.
Well, I'm pretty sure people will, because it, going back to that conversation, because that was the first video that you published. It was very interesting because, like I said, you touched upon some topics that I guess a lot of people wouldn't ask Phil,
Yeah,
especially when it comes to spirituality. How he came about. His story when he worked in Puerto Rico. And
yeah,
you mentioned he was almost close to not being a basketball coach, but then luck happened,
yeah,
and now he's one of the most accomplished coaches of all time. So
yeah. And I mean, we're talking about Phil, but I think it goes for all of us too.
yeah.
And to me, it's like maintaining this faith in that we're where we're supposed to be,
Hmm.
and wherever that is, and trusting things as they are, that they're right where they are. And that's what I've learned from my time with Phil. Is like, you spend time with him, or I hope you can watch the conversation, and it comes through. But he's very humble, and
Yeah.
there's no arrogance, there's no like I was a great coach. It's just explaining how he saw it and why he did things the way he did, and where he came from, and what he learned from his parents, and like what he learned from his being raised in the church, and all these different things. So I think he's been very impactful in my life for that, being able to have those conversations with him. So I thought it was unfortunate what the New York media did with it, but that's who the New York media is.
Yeah, they're very the media always goes for a story. It's all about
Yeah,
having clickbait. It doesn't have to be necessarily true, as long as it's out there. That's how
yeah.
a lot of people operate these days.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting conversation for me because I've been around it my whole life. Is like seeing my dad in the media, and it always affected me emotionally. Like seeing them talk bad about him, or seeing how they react to certain situations, or seeing that he's going to get fired, whatever it is. But I think Phil is unique in the sense that if like you ask him a question, if you have access to ask him a question, he's going to answer it honestly how he feels.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not saying it as a negative or a positive. He's just telling his side, like you asked him the question. And I think what we see a lot now, because of the way the media reacts to things, you see a lot of people not answering honestly,
Mm-hmm.
and then it becomes difficult to learn in those situations, or answering with like ego, and answering with like more emotional than like, I guess, the capital T truth, which it's to be interpreted however you want.
And it seems like all great, like not just players, but all the greats in different areas, in different fields, like a lot of them are humble, and that's one of the things and one of the reasons why they're so brilliant at the same time. Ego is gone. Obviously we all have
Yeah,
ego to a certain degree, and sometimes it's hard to contain your ego, but being humble and understanding that you're a part of that process, it's very astonishing when someone who's that successful admits that.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you, and to me it's inspiring,
Hmm.
because to have that level of success, and then not change who you are. I guess it's going to change how you are, but not make you feel like you're different or better than anyone else, is very inspiring. I think, as you said that, I thought I was watching Gino Oriema last night talking about how the referee didn't call a foul in the game that got them to the Final Four. And I don't know if you're familiar with the clip, but he was just saying, it was like, listen, like, that's the game. You know, I'm not going to apologize if it was or wasn't a foul. That's the game. You know, it went in our favor. You know, other times it doesn't go in our favor. And I think that is, as a leader, as a parent, as a person, I think that's where I aspire to, like, appreciate as well as understand that in our most difficult times, that's just the way life is. It's not always fair.
Mm,
And you know, and to be able to look in the mirror and say, okay, it's okay. You know, I can withstand this, and I can maintain my faith and confidence in myself, and be authentic to who I am, and be kind to other people and be honest, and to maintain that through those adversities and also through those successes,
mhm.
I think is a really, really valuable characteristic that I've seen in Phil. And I look at a Gino or Emma, you know, the women's basketball coach, and I see the same thing in that commentary. Uh, so those, I look up to those comments, and the way that they handle adversity and success, and it's definitely a nice model.
Mm. I mean, it's definitely an approach that I think always in some way brings success to whatever you're doing. And I wish a lot of more people would apply it and have
Yeah.
that kind of mindset.
Well, I think it takes a lot of courage, right?
Mm,
It takes a lot of courage to accept that we weren't good enough on that day, and that
mm,
we made choices that didn't bring us success, or that brought our teammates failure. You know, I think it, you know, raising a 6-year-old daughter right now, and a 4-year-old daughter, like, I see these things. There's like shame involved when they make a mistake. There's, you know, there's guilt involved, and I
mm,
think it's the same things we experience as adults. We just cover them up in a lot of different ways. And I think, you know, the one thing I want to teach my children, and I want to be a good example of as a coach and a parent, is that it's okay. Like, I failed.
mm.
I wasn't good enough today. I need to be better tomorrow. What can I do to do that? And once you accept those things, then you're able to grow from that space. So, but
Yeah, a lot of life works in sometimes in mysterious ways. You know, you can always, you can never have only ups. Sometimes you have to fail, because usually after failure comes success. At least that's what everybody's hoping for. But accepting to fail is completely okay. I mean, we're all human beings. That's the nature
yeah.
of how life works.
Well, and you know, I'll I'll plug our next podcast with Phil, because he talks about that a lot with the Detroit Pistons, and that how thankful, I'm not sure if that's the word, but it seems as if he was almost grateful that they beat them up, because that was what they needed to grow. You
Hmm.
know, it's like all that pain, all those lessons, all those cheap shots, all, you know, whatever it is, that strategy allowed them to be the success that they were for the next 3 years, which is interesting, because the NBA is so different now. Is like, will you have a team for 5 years together? And they had, you know, they kept that team together, and it's something I've thought about a lot. Is, you know, because people are moving teams so much, is like you're kind of losing that
Core group.
togetherness, and
Yeah.
that, yeah, in that group understanding. You know, one of my friends, Leon Rice at Boise State University, who we had on our podcast as well, you know, it's that shared suffering. You know, shared
Mhm.
suffering provides growth. You know, if when you feel pain together, you feel more powerful on the other end of it. It might feel miserable at the time, but you know, I'm a huge fan of Ted Lasso. I don't know if you've seen the show on Apple TV, but at the end of it, he talks about, you know, like, you know, suffered together. You know, you're
Mhm.
not alone. When you can really feel pain with other people, that builds that bond even closer. And those are the special things that sports and teams allows us to do.
Yeah, I mean, you actually said it perfectly. You know, it's all about growing together, and when you do that, when you go through those obstacles, and the Bulls were a perfect example. You know, they had, the Pistons had success against them for several years. They stayed together. They suffered together, and then they were the best team in the NBA for several years,
Yeah.
which in my opinion is very different than the NBA today, where it seems like players. I'm not sure if that's the difference in eras and how people are brought up. But it seems like, after the first failure, people, players are like, I'm out. I don't want to suffer anymore. I'm going somewhere else.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
people back then, it seems like they were like, okay, you beat me. I suffered, I failed, but I'm coming back next year.
Yeah. And I think we always, as we get older, we look back and um, kind of make it more special than it is. I'm sure that there was the same difficulties going back then as and some of the same bickering, but it does seem like the nature of NBA basketball, pro basketball, as well as like collegiate basketball here with the transfer portal. I think there's going to be 1,000 players in the transfer portal, and I hope we don't lose like what we're talking about is that ability to suffer and accept that we weren't good enough, but we can get better
Mm.
if we put in the time and the work. But yeah, I mean, now we're just acting like we're old people, talking about back in our day.
Back in our day, yeah. We always conclude our conversations, our interviews with quick fire questions, very easygoing, just
Okay.
simple answers. What was your favorite team growing up? Favorite NBA team growing up?
Sonics.
The yeah. The original Lob City.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. No, Gary Payton was like, I loved his tenacity, and I learned a lot from those teams. I was a ball boy on a lot of those teams, so I got to spend a lot of time with them and experience some of those successes.
and what was your favorite player growing up?
Michael.
Yeah.
I mean, he was. I think also my dad used to always talk so highly about him. He was part of the North Carolina tradition that my dad was, with Dean Smith, and
Mm.
so we almost kind of felt like family, like he was part of like our tree, an
Mhm.
extended family. And I had the opportunity to meet him, and kind of as a kid, that's a pretty incredible experience.
Mhm. Um, what is your all-time starting lineup? If you had to choose five players from the NBA history, like what would be your favorite starting lineup?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just go off the top of my head. I would say probably I would probably go with Steph, Michael. Uh, let's go small. We'll go Kobe, LeBron, and then Shaq. Why not?
Interesting.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I know LeBron doesn't like to play the four, but
wow. But it's an interesting lineup. Interesting lineup. Who do you think are top five or yeah, top five players in the NBA right now?
um, I mean, LeBron is still, they're defending champions, so you got to put him there. Kevin Durant, I thought, has shown incredible level when he came back. And
Yeah.
granted, he hasn't played the whole season, but I think what James Harden is doing is, to me, I love it because he's had such an interesting career going from Oklahoma.
Mhm.
You know, those three came to mind. Uh, I mean, like I said, I don't follow it too closely. The other two names that are coming to mind are Luka and Giannis.
Mhm.
Uh, but I'm probably leaving 3 or 4 guys out that are
It's
very
okay.
deserving of it. Yeah.
It's very good. Very good starting five.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you don't watch the NBA that much, but who do you think will win? Who do you think will be in the NBA finals?
Well, I'm employed by the LA Lakers, so
Of course.
there's some, I can't be. I'm a little partial to them. They're going through a tough stretch right now, so I'm hoping that this adversity creates that shared
Mhm.
suffering, and they can get through it in a positive manner. Which it's hard. It's hard. I've talked to some of the coaching staff and players, and it's a difficult thing. But I think the Lakers, if those guys can get healthy, should be there, or at
Mhm.
least be competing for it. And then I can you deny what the Brooklyn Nets look like when they have their pieces? And everyone has talked so much about James, and that's why I love what he's doing. Is I've always, because I was in the league around when James was a rookie, and
Mhm.
James Harden came into the league as a really good field player. He had a really good feel in the pick and roll. He had like this passing knack, and he developed himself as a scorer, and kind of by necessity. But I mean, you watch him now. I mean, he distributes the ball at a really really high level, and it's cool to see him playing for Steve Nash, because Steve Nash was one of my favorite players. So
Mhm.
I would say those two teams, but as we talked about earlier, like Phil mentioned, a lot of this stuff has to do with luck.
Mm-hmm.
Injuries, uh, standings, home court advantage, referees.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that are up, there. So
Yeah. So I mean, whenever you win or get to the finals, it's an incredible feat. So hopefully that's the case for our organization with the Lakers, um, and then to see what they're trying to do in Brooklyn, that would be really interesting to be able to have those three on the court when it matters most,
mhm.
to see what type of results you can produce.
Mm. Coby, we came to the end of this interview. It was pleasure speaking with you. It was pleasure meeting you. I wish you all the best in your coaching career. I hope to see you in the NBA or whatever you feel like you belong and that you feel
Yeah.
like being. And good luck with your podcast. I'll definitely keep an eye. There are some interesting topics that you discussed like I said, in your previous podcast. So I'm looking forward to hearing more.
Yeah. No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. It's always fun to talk basketball.
It's always, yeah, basketball is everything.
Yeah. Well, not really, but
Yeah, well,
to some of us.
it's interesting, how I always perceive it in a way that it's funny how it all started with just the ball.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Ball had the basketball has energy, and it produced all of this in some
Yeah.
way, which is, in my opinion, it's astonishing.
Yeah, no, I agree. I always tell our players, at the end of the day, it's still the game you started playing when you were 5. It's no matter what, if you're playing in the Staples Center, Real Madrid versus Barcelona, it's still wherever you picked up your first basketball, it's the same game.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like I said, one more time, thank you. Pleasure having you on the show, and good luck with coaching career, with your family, and life in general. Hopefully,
I
we'll be
appreciate
able
it.
to chat sooner than later.
Yeah, in person maybe. Best luck
Hopefully.
with you and your guys, what you're trying to do over there.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and have a good rest of the day.
You too. Take care.
Cheers. Have a good one.